Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic, Donald Trump. Apparently, he wants to be back on social media. He wants to be on Twitter. We're going to find out the details because, unlike myself, we've got somebody here who is well-researched at all times. But as you know, we only exist thanks to your support. Please super chat your comments, positive or negative, whether you think Trump is the devil or whether you think we are far leftists that need to give Trump a break. Please super chat and please consider becoming an Ayn Rand Center UK member, the one social media website that has not yet banned Donald Trump. Please vote with your money. Thank you, Marilyn, for the super chat right off the bat. Can anybody beat her $4? I don't think so, but let's find out. Please welcome a guy who's all the way from Greece. He is now in England. Who cares where he is? He's here. We're on the internet. Please welcome Nikos.
Thank you, Rucka. So today's topic is interesting from three different angles. The one angle is, first of all, what is the topic? So in Florida, for some reason, Trump, through his attorney, tried to pass an injunction that would reinstate him in Twitter. So some months ago, in July, I think, Trump actually sued. Trump brought to court not only Twitter, but also Google for his YouTube ban and Facebook. So now Trump is trying through an injunction to go back to Twitter. And just a reminder, Trump was taken off Twitter in January after the 6th January events. And he lost, obviously, his account and his 89 million followers. And the idea was that Trump was promoting violence. And this is why, in an orchestrated move, the social media companies removed him. Now, the obvious line here is that, okay, Trump is suing Twitter. Twitter has free speech. We've said this a million times. We're going to say it again. And but this is not the only interesting thing. For me, there are three interesting things here. The one is the line of attack that Trump chooses. So if you keep in mind Trump himself, Trump is someone who is, a bit of erratic, a bit of impulse driven, and this was also in his lawsuit. The other interesting thing is how this event is portrayed by the media. And here I'm going to throw a bit of red meat to those of you who otherwise would be alienated by the fact that we're going to attack Trump. Not that I care to appease you, but it's a fact. I found very interesting how some major news outlets report on this topic, but that's an afterthought. So let's start with the injunction itself. So Trump does three things, tries to do three things. He tries to hit three birds with one stone. The problem is that you cannot hit all these three birds with this one stone. So Trump claims three things. Number one, that social media companies who banned him did this to appease Washington, the new administration. Or if not to appease, they did this under actual, not coercion, but influence, undue influence. This is the one line of attack. So if this is the case, then he needs to attack the government. He needs to say, look, the government put pressure on Twitter. Twitter here is the victim in a way. And therefore, I'm attacking the government. But he's not doing this. He's attacking Twitter. His second line of attack is that this is actually censorship. And this goes against the First Amendment. And this is something which is mentioned, actually, the term censorship. So the second issue here is that the former president of the United States, has an understanding of censorship, which is problematic, to use the term that the left loves to use. And the third issue here is that Trump not only seems to be misunderstanding censorship, but listen to this sentence. Twitter, quote, exercises a degree of power and control over political discourse in this country that is immeasurable, historically unprecedented, and profoundly dangerous to open democratic debate. So this is part of the claim that the attorney brought for the injunction. Now, I couldn't find the full text, but I found this line very, very interesting. Listen it again. Twitter exercises a degree of power and control over political discourse. If I asked you who uses this language, what would you say? You would say, this is leftist language. This is exactly what I get in my first year sociology essays about power and how these big corporations have power and due influence, as opposed to what? Like, what would be the due influence? So this is what I find interesting to begin with this case, that Trump is trying to attack from every possible angle. It's the government's fault. It's the social media and its censorship, and it's the social media and they have too much power. And he kind of tries to see what will stick, like the guy who's stuck in the elevator and pushes every button to see what happens. So as usually, I come to this story trying to be, lenient. But when I see this, it's difficult to be lenient and it's difficult to have sympathy for this campaign by Trump, although you know my position that I found his banning absolutely ridiculous. But that's another discussion.
No, his banning was not ridiculous, but I'm not saying the decision is easy. I'm glad it wasn't my decision, but I'm not even sure it was orchestrated necessarily. The whole nation was shocked at what took place January 6th, and a lot of people wanted nothing to do with Trump. But I mean, yeah, like I've long said, conservatives are typically yesterday's leftists or liberals or whatever, however you would, yesterday's progressives. Today's conservatives, so to speak, or today's Republicans, certainly what they've become under Trump, they're basically fighting for progressivism of yesteryear, for increased socialized medicine, or at least to preserve the elements of socialized medicine we have, to expand the entitlement state, which includes you're entitled to a job, you're entitled to protection against foreign workers, foreign companies, you're entitled to be protected, they say, against businessmen in your own country, starting a business here and then taking it elsewhere or hiring somebody somewhere else. I mean, this is progressivism. There was a time when wanting these things made you a progressive, and this was in the early 20th century when the word fascist was not a dirty word yet, before the world wars. And this was the left first rearing its head in America, and today's conservatives / Republicans are definitely following in that tradition, or they're part of that. They're not hostile to socialized medicine. They're not hostile to protectionism, and they seem to be for it. So when it comes to something like this, public enemy number one in today's culture is, big tech, right? Like everyone has a problem with them. Certainly conservatives and Republicans have a problem with them. And the leftists, they're not exactly one to stick up for big companies or big anything, but at the same time, they're not ones to celebrate capitalism either. I mean, what am I saying? They're not ones they don't like big, but also they're not. They obviously, it's like their own. Like these companies represent their values is the point I'm making. So they're less openly hostile to big tech is what I'm saying, because big tech tends to pay them lip service. However, virtually nobody in today's culture is for big tech or big companies. So for Trump to either invoke antitrust or whatever it is he's invoking in this case, some kind of weird muddling of private property with whatever it is he's doing here, people are not exactly going to stand up against this. This is not eminent domain, which Trump has also participated in his younger years. But this is not, mom and pop shop being bulldozed, so that Trump could build a new hotel. This is the most hated company in the country being sued in some respect, or in some way, Trump trying to use the government to bypass Twitter's judgment in order to reinstate Trump. Like, who's going to stand up against this other than very principled advocates of private property and individual rights like ourselves?
So here's the thing, and we discussed this also with Prager, with the Prager campaign, legal campaign against Google. Notice that 2-3 years ago, their line was, look, we understand that this is not, we understand that they have a right to do so, but they breach the rules of conduct or something like that. This was a breach of contract. Notice how within 2-3 years, this line has now shifted. No, this is clearly, they are censoring us. These two are completely different. If you bring them to court and say, they have breached contract here, you recognize, you accept the premise that they have a right to kick you off, but this time they shouldn't kick you off because you had the contract. It's the equivalent of saying, my landlord has a right to kick me off, generally, but this time we had the contract that I'd be here for 6 months, and after 3 months, he says, off you go. By going to court with this claim, I recognize that he has the legal title to the house, that property rights exist. But property rights exist, but here we had the contract. Now, I can respect that. This, though, has moved within 3 years to they're censoring me, which means I have a right in their platform, which means I am questioning the premise of property rights. It's as if saying my landlord hasn't got a right to do in his property what he wants, and it's irrespective of whether we have a contract or not. I feel like I need to stay here forever. What did Brennan O'Neill, a Marxist, or self-described Marxist as his enemies want to say, what did he say with the debate against Yaron last week? At some point, we'll have to decide. It's either free speech or property rights. And what do we see? The conservative culture warriors saying, agreeing. They're saying, screw property rights, free speech comes over property rights, without realizing the obvious. How can you have free speech without property rights? How can you, it's what Ayn Rand says, it's like you cannot have a soul without the body. It's like a ghost. Rights needs to be expressed in action, and property right is this expression in action. Do you want to say something more about that, Rob?
I agree, and I like that analogy that Rand, in usual brilliance, identifies. I think speech represents the mind, like it's the expression of your thoughts, and property represents your body. Obviously, it's concrete and it's in reality, outside of just your thoughts. Maybe just the way I phrase it is troublesome, but anyway, you get my point. We are not floating ghosts that have the right to think and to speak without the right to sustain our bodies, nor are we walking corpses who just need our property, but not to think and express those thoughts via speech. So, this in the Berkeley riots, definitely a mixed case where like property was being called public because it's a publicly funded university. And even then, Rand was saying that to the extent that this property is property, you cannot just have anarchy on it. You cannot just have students overthrowing the faculty and et cetera. You need property needs, even in a mixed case like a public university, someone needs to be in charge of it. And ideally, we want to move towards privatizing it. I remember when Trump was first flirting with running for president in around 2010 or 2011. He was making a lot of noise in politics. And I remember him being interviewed, I think, by Sean Hannity, who at the time was kind of probably a little lukewarm on Trump. Like he was open to the whole Trump thing, but he was not showing too much enthusiasm because this was during the Tea Party era. So Hannity, people like Hannity, Mark Levin, Rush Limbaugh, they used to talk about the individual or like about capitalism and, principles, the founding principles. Mark Levin published a book talking about the founding fathers of America and all that. And now here's this guy, Trump, who by all indications is not exactly a man of principle. So even though he's kind of on the Republican side and yeah, he's finally punching left, but how does he kind of integrate with this Tea Party sentiment, this Tea Party spirit of the right at the time? So I remember Sean Hannity asking Trump about the Tea Party. Like, what do you think of the Tea Party? And Trump goes, I love them. I love it. He's a real opportunist, right? I love the Tea Party. And when asked to expand on why that is, of course, he wouldn't say something like, people have a right not to be taxed. They have a right to their property. We don't want socialism. He wouldn't even go that far. He just said something. I mean, there's very much from memory, but it stuck with me for a reason. He said, he goes, I love this country. I really love people who work. That's what he said. I just love people who work. Like, I just love most people. Like his point, I think he was saying, I like the average American. To me, the Tea Party, he's saying, to me, the Tea Party is like folks next door, mom and pop shops, people who work for a living, people that don't want, anything other than to work. So this Tea Party opportunist that was Trump in 2011, he could have at least picked up some of the talking points of the Tea Party and said, I like the Tea Party because, capitalism is good. He wouldn't even say that. He just said, I really like, this country, the people of this country, people who work. And here we are today, all these years later. Trump basically represents the Republican Party. You cannot be a Republican today without liking Trump. You cannot criticize Trump. It's very rare to see. He's made Republicans a lot dumber, and that includes some of our own audience who, when you and I are criticizing Trump, we're the bad guys, evidently. Should we read a few super chats?
Shall I throw the red meat to Trumpians first? Okay, read the super chat first, and then I'll throw the red meat.
Roland with 4.99 euros says, can he just pass an executive order given that he, quote, won the election? Maybe he can try that. Let's see take it to the courts and see if they uphold it. Marilyn with $5 says, if Twitter exercises undue influence, then no one can think for himself. Why not?
Again, that's exactly the leftism there, right? The leftism that says, and the determinants that says that newspapers are telling you this, therefore you'll think this. This is first year sociology students analysis. Murdoch and the bad guys are telling you this, and therefore people are automatons who are going to vote conservatives. So you'd expect that the intellectuals of the right or a president would rise above that, but no.
I mean, yeah. And, again, like 10, at this point, it's more like 12, 13 years ago. You had Republicans and sort of conservative influencers answering the left and saying, no, people are not manipulated by corporations. Corporations don't tell you what to think and what to believe. You can think for yourself. You can make your own decisions in life. But today, as we can see in Trump's lawsuit, or just by the various elements of the right that are wanting to break up big tech, or at least to criticize it beyond what's appropriate, they're saying that, basically we don't have we don't have democracy anymore. Like we don't have actual voting, and not only because of fraud, but because people are actually being told who to vote for by a monolith that is big tech. Let alone what else to believe. Roland with 4.99 euros says, I blocked him, I think Trump, from my Twitter way back in 2015. Here's daring him to sue me too. Yeah, that would be pretty interesting. I mean, so why can't? So yeah, I can block Trump, but Twitter can't essentially block his username from logging in. Marilyn with $2. And by the way, Trump blocks a lot of people. For a guy who doesn't give any Fs, he sure loves blocking people. Marilyn with $2 says, you can't have free speech without property rights. Ain't it the truth? I mean, rights go hand in hand. Just like your mind and body are inseparable, so too property and speech.
But let me say something on that, on the censorship and all that stuff. It's not super, and this is going to sound paternalistic. I'm not saying in a paternalistic way. It's not easy to understand exactly these things. So it took me ages. What made the difference for me was Tara Smith's article, The Free Speech Vernacular. The Free Speech Vernaculars. It's available for free, the PDF, and it's not intellectual property theft. I mean, it's officially available. So if you Google Tara Smith, Free Speech Vernacular, or something like that, also it appeared in New Ideal. You can see the preview in New Ideal, and then it gives you the link to the paper that Tara Smith published. All these years, it was the one thing that made me understand, oh, now I get it. Now I get what is censorship, what is not, and why.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even just when you speak, you need to be standing somewhere. You need to be standing or sitting somewhere. So even just the ground beneath your feet when you speak, it has some relationship to your right to speak. Speech does not take place in a vacuum. So speech and property go hand in hand. I mean, they're inseparable, is how I'd put it. All right, Tacey with 4.49 pounds says Nicki Minaj and Trump are off Twitter, and Iranian leaders who invoke slaughtering gays are left on it. Discuss.
I'll get to that. That's the red meat I was taking. There is more to that.
It's. I don't take it as like a big gotcha moment. Like, I agree that social media is run by stupid people. I wish we were consistent in our values in the culture. I wish Iran and the Taliban and various other terrible people were blocked from social media. But, there's cultural relativism for you. We hold people stateside to one standard, and we hold foreign leaders and foreign cultures to a different one. And we can't judge them because that's their culture, man. So there's my response. But did you want to expand on that or to?
Well, yeah, I found the reporting hilarious. So some corners, like the reactionary right, use the term the cathedral, which what they mean is that the media, the universities, they all speak with the same voice, and it's not a conspiracy behind it. It's that this is how they're taught. So when you were reading about the injunction, all the articles would mention this was in January 6th. These events were horrendous. Just to remind you, people died. And Trump made a lot of comments, and he used Twitter to make very, very racist comments. And it was as if they were trying to outcompete the other to make sure that they tell you, you have to remember, Trump is a horrible, horrible guy, which is very interesting because when they mention other form of violent protest, they will never mention, oh, remember that in the summer of 2020, X people died, or remember that Joe Biden did this thing. So there's this saying which says the fact that you're paranoid doesn't mean that they're not after you. There's no doubt in my head that they are after Trump, but they are after Trump is not the same that Trump has the right to sue Twitter. And the fact that these people have all been trained, and again, it's not a conspiracy, it's the general ideology, trained to see the world in such simplistic terms. And for them, Trump is the absolute evil, and they have no standards. All this, I agree. I agree that Twitter has no standards because they are part of this same culture and this same groupthink. But exactly for these reasons, I would expect from Trump to say, you know what? I am the opposite of these pieces of anything. I'm the opposite of these people. And therefore, I understand what property rights means. And therefore, I understand what the First Amendment is. And therefore, I understand what capitalism means. So I'm not asking here, I'm asking the basics. At least pretend that you understand these things. If you want to sue Twitter, you don't frame it as a free speech and censorship issue. Because if you do this, you're saying, I challenge you at the core of the idea that you have property rights over your property. And this is why I consider it inexcusable. And this is why I start by blaming Trump and not by the ridiculousness of Twitter banning Trump and having rev guards or Talibans or leftists who promote violence or tankies or whatever else. And to be honest, I want Twitter to have tankies. Tankies are the Stalinists who post memes. I mean, they say the left can meme. Tankies can meme. It's fun to see like gigachad stupid memes. I'm not gonna say ban these as well. I will say people have the judgment to judge who they see, who they view on Twitter, and how they judge what they view, because I trust people's capacity. I don't trust that they're going to make the right choice. They might see the gigachad Stalin tweet and then go become Stalinists. That's their own problem. I don't consider that because they viewed it, this is undue influence, as Trump says. So that's the last thing I wanted to say on that.
You know, even with as much as I agree with everything you're saying, I tend to need, I still need to push back against speaking about this monolith that is, you know, Silicon Valley or big tech. I need to point out their policies are often incoherent and inconsistent. They allowed Trump to be on their platform when he was running for president, making all types of outlandish statements that could have gotten him banned from Twitter. They let him stay on. He became president. They were still legally able to ban him. If they really wanted to make their policy all about electoral politics, they could have banned Trump when he was inaugurated and done so in order to keep him from getting reelected or whatever it was. But when they actually did finally ban him, it was about January 6th, and that is not a political position, that is not a partisan issue. Now, of course, you can point out, as people will point out, but leftist, you know, violence was taking place all year. You're not wrong. Leftist violence, Taliban violence is given a pass. But the fact that some things are given a pass does not mean Trump did nothing wrong. But the excuses people keep making for Trump, I think, speaks to the fact that he has not made us smarter.
But let me ask one particular question. When exactly did Trump condone or support? How did they, let me use the exact word, something, he condoned violence and all that stuff?
His actions were perceived to have led to what took place on January 6th. Now, we're not in the court right now duking this out, deciding if he's guilty or not. Twitter and other websites decided he was guilty enough for them to ban him from their platform. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't remember what else I was going to say. Yeah, no,
so I'm saying they were wrong, because in the same way as Twitter hasn't got quote undue influence, the fact that Trump says the election was stolen, even though it's stupid, does not mean that if someone says, oh, this to me means I'm going to invade the Capitol, that it's Trump's fault.
I think if you look at the way he was speaking, saying we won't let them get away with this, we're going to take, I think he might have even said we're going to take the Capitol, but I'm not sure. I don't want to get sued. I don't want to get sued by him either. But look, I mean, the point being, he was perceived by many reasonable people. And again, Twitter did not evict him from his own house. They banned him from their own homes. And they have a right to do that because of the way his actions were perceived. Believe me, we've all been reprimanded by social media for much, much less, to put it lightly. I personally am not on Twitter, or at least my main account was banned. I'm probably going to be gone from YouTube too soon, probably at some point soon. But I mostly chalk it up to incoherence on the part of these websites. I don't see it as one big ideological machine, because when you look at what's popular on social media, when you look at Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and this unfunny guy named JP Sears and Dave Rubin and Steven Crowder, these people are huge, as Trump would put it. They are filthy rich and they are getting ungodly views. A rapper named Tom MacDonald, who makes himself a victim in every song, talking about how everyone's coming to shut him down and censor him, whereas in reality, he's actually the algorithm loves him. And so does the rest of society. These anti-leftists are doing phenomenally well on big tech. So if big tech is one big branch of the Democrat Party, why is it that Trump needs to stand outside the Capitol saying what he said to finally get banned, but all these other Republicans seem to be thriving and breaking records on?
Well, they would say that it's only Trump who is really dangerous. I'm not.
Okay. Then why is Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens and the Daily Wire and all these people allowed on on YouTube and Twitter and all of that if big tech is one big Democrat monolith?
Yeah, but we all guess that Candace Owens is going to be next, mostly due to COVID.
I mean, she's certainly pushing buttons in that respect. She certainly keeps opening her mouth about COVID vaccines, and she was talking about vaccines a long time ago. I mean, what do these people actually want? At a certain point, these companies do need to make a decision one way or the other. So like I said, when we had James Valiant on the show, the internet was always too good to be true. The internet was always too good to be true. This wild west of the internet obviously got us to a point where we have an internet troll elected president, and vaccine opinions are widespread and having influence. And these companies need to make a decision one way or the other. Are they going to allow everything, or are they going to start making decisions and then be accused of being Democrat partisans? So the internet is just too good to be true. What are we going to do? There's really no way to solve this. But I'm still going to resist this idea that big tech is one big Democrat monolith. I think if you were to go into these companies, just like when you walk the streets of America and you meet people, a lot of them are really not into this political correctness. A lot of them really don't like seeing bannings and canceling and stuff like that. So if you were to go into the Silicon Valley and speak to people who work there, you might be surprised that they're not all purple-haired feminists that can't wait to put Trump fans into gulags.
Well, okay, yeah, anyway, that's for another day.
Okay,
have we got any other comments?
Jonathan with $2.99 in the super chat. Thank you for that. And that's all we got. All right.
Okay. So we move to Clubhouse, from which today I will be absent. But so 8 o'clock, HBTV, the topic is faith, and the topic is way catchier. The title is way catchier, but so I'm sure there are like 5 other things happening today.
How about I tell us what they are, since I have the notes. Okay. We're about to jump over to Clubhouse, or I am about to jump over to Clubhouse for a little while. Then at 7 p.m. UK time, the bottom of this hour, it's Physics by Phone with Dr. Amanda Maxim. And then an hour after that at 8 p.m. UK time, it's HBTV with Dr. Harry Binswanger. Today's episode, Faith, an ice pick to the brain. Looking forward to that. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Nikos, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. And goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.